Welcome to the movement at Mainframe. On this show, we'll feature the metalsmith work of Jen Lawler Designs and Community Radio with Ron Sorenson, the general manager of 89.9 FM KFMG. Mainframe Studios is a nonprofit organization located on Keogh Way in downtown Des Moines. This space is a 5-story building that originally housed 75 shareable studios on 3 of the 5 floors, but is now home to over 100 creative professionals and is expanding. Here's Shaban Spain, the director of Mainframe Studios, with an update on their progress.
You know, this year has been really tricky with the pandemic and a lot of economic downturns, and it's been a trick for a lot of people, but it's been interesting that our formula to be financially self-sustaining business model, nonprofit, here for generations to come, is even working in times of crisis. And we are building out more floors. Our demand is huge. We have a very long wait list for spaces. I think it's because the affordability and the community and the exposure that these artists get to keeps the demand high. So it's really hopeful. I think we can take see a lot of hope in what we're experiencing here for the future. People have a bright outlook for the future. So we have 57 more studios coming open in early 2021, probably in March. We've already pre-leased those spaces to many artists, and we'll continue to do that until they open in March.
Let's take a quick break before we start soldering into the custom art of metalsmithing and custom jewelry. Our first featured artist is Jen Lawler. For over 25 years, Jen loves making contemporary wearable jewelry. She specializes in creating custom work using silver, gold, and precious gems for her clients.
So I'm a graduate from Iowa State. I also took classes at University of Iowa. Then I worked for a silver and goldsmith for 12 years. And in total have been a silver and goldsmith for 25 years now. I create a lot of custom modern pieces that are great to wear and lightweight. Use a lot of colored gemstones and diamonds and pearls. I'm a Roosevelt High School graduate, and I took metalsmithing there when it was available. So I was unsure what I wanted to do at first. I did a community college and took another metalsmithing class at Drake, and it was hardcore, it was intense, and it was kind of a make or break that they do for freshmen sometimes, and I loved it and felt like I had a knack for it, and I just kept going into the liberal arts degree through craft design and three-dimensional design, and 25 years later I still love designing jewelry and using my traditional metalsmithing techniques, which is, soldering and constructing, and I'll carve wax models and have those cast. And I think working with clients as much as I do, it just keeps everything interesting all the time. So I was first approached by Justin Mendelbaum when he was doing research on finding artists that would be interested in having a space that was a working space that was affordable, and I was doing art shows at the time, and so when he presented the idea, I was a little unsure, but as it became to fruition, it met all of my targets in need. I live 5 minutes from here. I'm able to have a space that showcases my work and create my own hours. So it met every checkbox that I needed, and it's been wonderful. I've been here since we could move in, which was 3 years ago in August. Just the vibe of all the artists working together in terms of getting feedback. Some artists are, combining pieces and showcasing that, and we have themes for our open houses that are once a month that highlight several different artists each time. And I just love the vibe of the artists around and the great atmosphere in the building as a whole. Well, a lot of people will picture the torch and, putting a band together, and so it really goes down to forming a band, soldering joints together, forming a mounting around a stone and soldering that in place. So there's a lot of soldering that goes on with the way I create jewelry. There's a lot of different ways to create jewelry. So to be a traditional metalsmith, it encompasses the polishing and the texturing and the soldering, and then like being able to like finish that piece. And so you have those components that would be kind of similar to a welder, where they are welding the piece and finishing and filing. You have a lot of different pliers, and I have stamping tools and a rolling press, and a lot of the tools that are used that go into creating those finished pieces. So it kind of depends on what sort of jewelry you want to make in the end. And there's people that do wire wrapping that don't use a torch, and so it's not that same type of metalsmith that would be kind of defined in that way. Mine brings into it the artistic side of it, which kind of also brought me to Mainframe, full of artists. So I'm creating and designing all of the time. I do sketches and work with clients and do the start to finish. I don't make molds of my pieces. I don't create like a design and then make 15 of it like a commercial jewelry store might do. Well, they might make like 100 of them or whatever. I will carve a wax model, and it's called last wax casting, and so that means I just get one metal piece out of that. So it goes from my wax model that I've carved to the metal form of it, and because it's lost wax, it melts that wax away in the process, and if I wanted to get something like that again, I have to carve it again. And so that makes it unique every time as well. Every time I create something, it's hard to pinpoint a time frame, but especially with custom work, I'm able to get a pretty close estimate of what our design is and what's going to go into it, that I've developed over being in the business for as long as I have. But like this, for instance, these will be very quick because I've just formed a wire that I will polish at the end, and so I can make these in about a half an hour or less, where this is something that I take wire and I form into the circle, and then I have to make perfectly round, and I solder the tops on those, and so these may take a couple hours. But some pieces that I carve out of wax and have to have cast, those will take, I'm not working on it the whole time, but start to finish could take like 6 weeks to have a complete piece. I love the unique gemstones that I have in a lot of my necklace pieces that are one of a kind. Like this piece is just this beautiful geode druzy piece that you can create, and it looks like it's the outer space galaxy. And being able to have those kind of artistic expressions into pieces just fills me up. I do find myself loving asymmetry with contemporary line, just like modern, crisp angles. I love that modern architectural feel of pieces. I'm not as drawn to ornate or like kind of filigree pieces, or things that are more of a created in nature is not as much for me. I do like maybe some accented piece of that, but I'd say a lot of times it's more just clean and crisp lines for me.
We asked Jen, how can I get into metalsmithing? Are there classes here in Des Moines? What should I know?
Usually it's recommended to start out at the Art Center. Once classes are able to be in person again, they might be now. But they have some great metalsmithing teachers there. I've been approached to be one as well, but I just don't have the time in my day, unfortunately, to make that happen. And trying to just watch, there's YouTube videos, and just starting with some really, find out what the basic tools are that you can get to get going on it, and just keep practicing. I am here Monday through Friday typically, occasionally on a weekend or occasionally at night. It just depends on if a client's coming or if I have some deadlines coming up, or I do participate in about 5 shows. Getting ready for those, I always like to have a lot of new pieces for that. And so That's the best benefit about being in here is it's a secure, locked location, and I can keep my own hours and be here whenever I want. But I do full time. I also really just love to hear back from customers as they come to visit, or if I see them out and about, and how many compliments they get on their piece and how much enjoyment they have, and they wear it all the time. And that's my goal, is I want when people walk out of here that they feel like they can wear that piece of jewelry every day, and that will go with everything.
To see more of Jen's work and shop for available pieces, consider visiting her on the First Fridays event at Mainframe, or check her out on Etsy.com, Instagram, or Facebook at Jen Lawler Designs. We'll take a short break before we get a behind-the-scenes look at a listener-funded nonprofit radio station. Ron Sorenson is the general manager at KFMG LP. KFMG is a listener-supported and volunteer-operated low-power FM radio service in Des Moines. Let's hear more from Ron and his mission to operate KFMG as your community voice.
When people ask me what I do, I say, okay, I'm the general manager, music director, staff announcer, chief underwriting salesperson, co-production person. I do promotions and take out the trash. Pretty much everybody well, Gary Monty, who's our station manager and my unindicted co-conspirator, he and I probably wear any hat that can be worn at a radio station, with the possible exception of engineering. I know just enough engineering to get myself in really serious trouble. We have sent the man with the hat out the door. With our thanks, Scott Davis hosts Sunday Morning Jazz here at KFMG every Sunday from 6 a.m. until 10 a.m. 6 a.m., that's the crack of doom for a jazz musician, so we thank Scott for coming in. You're listening to KFMG LP Des Moines. We're at 98.9 FM on your dial here in central Iowa. Audio streams planet-wide from the KFMG website, easy to find at kfmg.org. I host weekday afternoons, just sort of regular KFMG programming. The only specialty show that I host is the Sunday morning acoustic brunch, because I love wooden music. And so I initially got into radio on a folk music program, and that wooden music is probably still my first love. In high school, I was in a folk music group called the Castlegate Singers, and Bill Plymatt Jr., who was doing a folk music program on the original version of KFMG, the classical version. His parents owned the station, so he got to do a folk music show late at night. He liked the music of our folk group. He recorded us a couple of times, had us on the radio. When he went to school in Minneapolis, I was the only person who had anything approximating a voice, which was nothing like it is today. It was sort of like this, but at least I was understandable. And more importantly to him, I think I shared his taste in music. So I ended up taking over his show when he went to college, when he went away to college. And 50 years later, here I am. That's how I ended up doing radio. During the late 60s, early 70s, as those folk artists started to plug in, we added a rock show, a late night rock show to the programming. The station was primarily a classical radio station. We staged a coup and took over the station from the classical people, and in 1970, KFMG went full-time progressive rock. In 1992 started what we call KFMG 2.0, which was a full 100,000 watt broadcast station. Pretty much same style programming, rock and roll for adults, music for people who are not hard of thinking. And that lasted for about 4 years. And in 2007, we started this version of KFMG with the help of Employee and Family Resources. Preston Daniels and I were probably the two moving parties behind getting this version of KFMG started. We were a fairly early resident. I think we completed the first floor, and at that point there were a number of folks on the fourth floor, but it wasn't yet filled. We love the concept of Mainframe. Well, one, we love the space. I mean, this is a wonderful place in which to live. It's a great place to have a radio station. But the concept of Mainframe itself is something that we are very much in support of. This version of KFMG has always been part of the mission. In addition to providing the music, the main non-musical mission of this iteration of KFMG has been to support the local cultural community. Specifically and most significantly the music portion of the local cultural community, because music is what we do. But our public service announcements, our programs, our non-musical programs tend to lean in a cultural direction. And so having, a bunch of painters and potters and poets, oh my, all around us makes collaborating with those folks much easier. We have one permanent full-time staff member. We probably have, it varies, but it runs usually between 25 and 30 volunteers. Everybody except Gary Monty and sometimes me, who's on the radio, is a volunteer. They're a cross-section of people. A lot of musicians, especially one of the programs that we have is called Iowa Homegrown. That's part of that support for the local music community, for the local cultural community. That's a couple of hours, or that's 3 hours of music exclusively by Iowa artists once a week. That's hosted by a rotating crew of some of the best musicians in central Iowa. Like any non-commercial radio station, I guess let's put it that way, there are three primary sources of funding. Listener donations, underwriting sales to entities that want to speak to our audience. We call those the non-commercial version of commercials, and grants and large donations from entities like Bravo or Polk County or the Iowa Arts Council, folks like that. One of the very first things I remember is, as a grade school kid, listening to the Kingston Trio's Tom Dooley. But at the same, and that was something that has stuck with me. But early on, like most kids, I listened to Top 40 radio, KIOA and KSO back in the day. And as getting into folk music significantly expanded my musical horizons. And then as those artists plugged in, and as the great sort of musical renaissance of the late 60s and early 70s occurred, I sort of got drawn back into rock and roll. So I tend to like melodic rock and roll. I hate to call it soft rock. We sometimes call it adult rock. But it's not very crunchy. It's rock and roll, but we call it listenable rock and roll. You will not hear much death metal on KFMG. I think this is it. I think this version of KFMG is that dream project. Fulfilling the dream by making this station financially independent is what we're working on most significantly at this point.
To learn more about the local music community and to share your voice, visit kfmg.org. Thanks for watching Movement at Mainframe on MC22. In the following weeks, we'll be featuring more Des Moines artists and their unique talent. For more information on the artists, visit mainframestudios.org.